And we're here live today with Mr. Trevor Loudon, author and filmmaker, he has a new book, White House Reds. It's all about Joe Biden. And of course, Amy Klobuchar is mentioned in there as well. A couple of his films is The Enemies Within. And new film project is Enemies Within the Church specifically. He can be found at trevorloudon.com. That's TrevorLoudon.com, trevorloudon.com. So, yeah, we are in the third month of the lockdown here in Minnesota, which seems to be last week's news now that we've moved on to the riots. But yeah, we've been in 3 months of lockdown, so it's sort of our privilege to have gone online with some of these activities. The pressure cooker was on for a long time, and I'm wondering what you might have to say about these incredible times that we're living in, Mr. Loudon.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to view the COVID virus and the riots in the same context and look at where they both came from, who's behind both of these things. Now, the communist Chinese don't like President Trump very much. You know, he's given them a hard time on trade. He stood with Taiwan against China, and he supported the Hong Kong protesters. And this was a lot of egg on the face of the Chinese. And they would be looking at thinking, 4 more years of this crazy guy in the White House. Can we possibly stand that? Can we stand it? We'll have a revolution in our own country. And they're thinking, well, what are we going to do? You know, we got to get back at this guy, but we don't want to take the blame for it. So they spread a virus, whether it was deliberately released or accidentally. We know it came out of almost certainly was weaponized out of a Chinese bioweapons laboratory in Wuhan, China. The Chinese deliberately spread it. We know that much. For instance, there's a big New Year's celebration in Wuhan each year. It's sort of like the Chinese Mardi Gras, and people come from all over the world for a week to celebrate it. And the local authorities said to the Chinese Communist Party, should we close this event this year because of the outbreak? And they were told no, to go ahead. So all these Chinese came from Canada and United States, Britain, Germany, France,
Italy.
New Zealand, Australia, Italy especially, came there, got infected, and all went back to their countries, right? So they spread it deliberately. Now, the Chinese Communist Party released a letter on April the 2nd, signed by 230 world communist parties. This was released by the International Department of the Chinese Communist Party, the group that liaises with all the foreign communist parties and tells them what to do, what line to follow, what to be promoting. And this letter had 4 themes. It was signed by the Communist Party USA, by the way, and it had 4 themes. First, this is not China's fault. This wasn't us, and anybody who says it is a racist. Okay, so this is the message you hear. It's all over. Second message, China's leading the world. We're the great guys here. We're helping Italy. We're helping Africa. We're saving everybody. Aren't we wonderful? Third message, we can do this because we have socialized healthcare. Look at America. What a mess they have because they don't have socialized healthcare. And the fourth message, blame Trump, blame Trump, blame Trump, blame Trump. Okay? Right. Now, on Tucker Carlson recently, he had a CIA officer, David Carlson or something was his name, a Democrat, and he said that he was very worried that his party, the leaders of the Democratic Party, were following the Chinese line over COVID. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. And Tucker said, why? He said, well, some of them are useful idiots, but I got to believe some of them are paid Chinese agents. Mm-hmm. So the Chinese want to destroy Trump for they want to keep this virus thing going as long as they can for 3 reasons. The first, sink the US economy, because that eases their competition against them. That destroys President Trump. And most importantly of all, this is what no one is saying, it destroys US military spending. Now, Obama gutted the US military. China and Russia have been building like crazy. They're getting ready for war against us. The only thing that can stop that is a strong US military. So Obama gutted it, probably on instructions from his masters, and Trump started to rebuild it, to his great credit. Well, he can only do that off the back of a strong economy. He can't do that with 30% unemployment and a massive budget deficit. This is aimed at the budget. And already 30 Democrats have written a letter to the House Armed Services Committee demanding big military budget cuts in the next budget go-around. This is a military attack on the United States. That's what it is. Okay.
Could I also add that your estimation about the way that these people flew in and out of Wuhan, to European countries and to North America, it's incidental, or it's not incidental, that at the same time they were allowed to travel internationally, residents of Wuhan were not permitted to cross the borders of Wuhan into the surrounding provinces. And what Americans don't see is that Wuhan's right at the geographic heart of China. It's landlocked by other Chinese provinces. So when Trump shut down the travel from China, and the Democrats called him a racist for doing that, that was at the very same time when Wuhan residents weren't being allowed to cross the bridges, cross the borders, cross the rivers into surrounding provinces.
They didn't want it spreading in their own country, but they didn't mind it spreading all around the world. They loved it, and so. But this is what. So where we are now, 2 weeks ago, we're starting to recover. There's a little bit of hope, Some states are coming out of the lockdowns. All the Republican states, the Democrat states, of course, will keep this going till hell freezes over if they can. But there's a little bit of hope. So just when we're starting to get a little bit like, bang, 2 weeks of rioting. Now the groups doing this. With all this about Antifa, like Antifa is this much of it.
Right.
Antifa is there, but fighting Antifa to stop the riots is a bit like fighting Italy to stop World War II. It's ignoring the Germans, it's ignoring the Japanese. You're just concentrating on Italy. The smallest part, the smallest problem.
Yeah, the weakest part.
The weakest part. See, this is organized by two pro-Chinese communist groups. One is called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and the other one is called Liberation Road. They both came out, they were both one organization once. They split in 1998, but they both kept the same name, which was really confusing. But in April last year, one of them became Liberation Road. So the Freedom Road Socialist Organization is headquartered in Minnesota, and coincidentally, and they're very close to Keith Ellison. They're very close to many of your DFL leading politicians, and they are a Maoist pro-communist Chinese group. They are the ones who led the protests against President Trump at the Republican Party convention in 2016, and at the time, their leader said, "Our job through the Trump administration is to make this country ungovernable." That was her words. They are completely coordinating these protests around the country.
They're doing a good job of coordinating them inside Minnesota as well, and the linkages between Minnesota and over-the-border groups that are now pouring into Minnesota from Washington State, from Chicago, from all over the region, really from Madison, Wisconsin as well. This Freedom Road group, not incidentally, that they both share the same name, that makes it harder for these groups to be identified, doesn't it?
And yeah, it does. Look, the police have no idea. The cops have no idea. The FBI has no idea of these people.
Neither do the mayors, apparently, because they're cooperating with some of these street.
Well, because the mayors come out of the same groups.
Yeah.
Frey is a community organizer. He knows these people.
It is interesting how the same group that booed Mayor Frey off the protest off the streets, it's the same group of people that went after Mayor Betsy Hodges not too long ago. So she was brought down by the mob that she had coddled. That same group of people pushed her right out of the room, and he just suffered the same fate.
Exactly. What they're trying to do is create a series of Mogadishus around the country. They've just taken over a block in downtown Seattle. They want to make Minnesota a launching base for revolution across the country. So you're going to see, just like they poured into New Orleans after the hurricane down there, they are pouring into Minnesota now. And just by the way, it is a felony to cross state lines to commit a riot. 5 years jail for that. If that was applied, we would see 10, 20,000 people in jail tomorrow. And that should be applied. But you are the target right here. They're going to come into you. They've got a friendly attorney general. They've got a friendly state government. They're going to set a little communististan in Minnesota if they can get away with it.
They also have some Indian reservations they can operate off of with impunity, because then they're extrajudicial and they're operating in a different nation within. So that's a whole involvement that Keith Ellison has with reservations that's being investigated by some other activists. And I'm not, mentioning the Maoist tactics, it was interesting you said the Freedom Road group is Maoist in nature, because we're seeing children being used in these rallies. Children are really leading the front with the fists in the air. And we've seen that here in Rochester, all over town for 2 weeks. I'm not certain that the children understand the meaning of the gestures that they're using as they're marching. But there's school teachers involved. There's the Rochester Public Schools has been implicated in these activities. Also, the mayor is apparently involved. But more talking about these groups, I mean, it's one bird with many feathers, right? Or one tree with many branches. How are these groups interrelated with others?
Well, see, in Minnesota, Freedom Road Socialist Organization works very closely with Democratic Socialists of America, which has over 600 members in the Twin Cities area. Chapters in Rochester, chapter in Duluth, another chapter in the prairies, around Wilma and places like that. They all work together, but Freedom Road is the big driver of this. But also Communist Party USA, also Socialist Alternative, also some of the anarchist groups. So you've got, plus obviously the Muslim groups like CARE and MAS, etc. They are all coordinated. This is one big movement. And this is happening. See, last year, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization set up a group called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. It was named after the group of the same name back in the 70s, run by the Communist Party and headed by Angela Davis, the iconic Angela Davis with the big afro. Well, she's the sponsor of the new organization, but the chairman of it is Frank Chapman, a former Communist Party member, now on the Central Committee of Freedom Road. And they set that up to coordinate these protests now. So they set that up in November last year because they knew they were going to be doing it this year. And it wouldn't have mattered if it was George Floyd or Fred Smith or Joe Jones. They knew some black guy was going to get killed somewhere this year by police, right? But it just happened. It was such a blatant, this was so egregious that it was very easy to spark it. They tried it in Kentucky. They tried it in Atlanta. It sort of got a little bit of traction, but this one kicked it off. But they would have done it next week or the week after. It's nothing to do with George Floyd. It's all to do with the revolution.
It seems that there were people coming into the area 2 weeks prior, 1 week prior to this Floyd incident. This was the impetus. This was the spark that lit the barn on fire. And looking at their tactics, fires set, books banned, streets renamed, of course, statues coming down. That's a perennial thing, right? Public school teachers leading children, chanting F Trump, F Trump. It clearly has nothing to do with George Floyd. It's a Maoist cultural revolution that we're seeing, where any intellectual is sort of up against the wall.
Yeah, look, you dare. How many people have been fired around the country for daring to say something against Black Lives Matter? You know,
Hmm.
well, if I could be fired, I'm sure I would have been, but I
Hmm.
can't, so I won't. But look, this is Maoist. This is a complete Maoist thing, and Maoists take over territory, make it their own, and spread the revolution from there. So they're trying to make Minnesota Maoist territory,
Hmm.
especially the Twin Cities area. But this is also happening in the South. They've taken over Jackson, Mississippi some time ago. They're very strong in Durham, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia. They're working hard there. Already got San Francisco pretty much. But
The timing was brilliant too, wasn't it? Because look, I mean, I learned how to use a pressure cooker when I lived in Africa, and gas, and right, and you got the vegetables and the meat under pressure. Well, they kept us in lockdown in America for 3 months, right? For going on 3 months, you can't go to church. There's no events. You mustn't leave your house. You're supposed to stay home. Hashtag stay home, right? Celebrities crying on social media, they miss their attention. You can't go to movies. Sports are still shut down in Minnesota. You can't go. You can't have a baseball game with the little league team. Everything is in lockdown, right? And you just keep that pressure building for 3 months, and then Floyd, and then that becomes the impetus because
yeah,
everybody's ready to go out to the park and hear some speeches now, even
yeah,
if
yeah.
they
It
don't
was
know
oh
why.
they couldn't have got it better, and they couldn't have got a better incident. You know, I don't know
Yeah.
how they would have contrived that incident, but it couldn't have gone better for them if they tried. But as I
Mhm.
say, it was primed. It was a bomb waiting to blow off. All it needed was someone to light the match.
Mhm.
And so, but we've got to look at the context of this because the other group involved in this, Liberation Road, they're the people that started Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a Maoist communist front. The three women who started it, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and Patrice Cullors, are all long-time affiliates of the Liberation Road group, then called Freedom Road Socialist Organization. They weren't just three chicks sitting around saying, wow, that guy Trayvon Martin got killed in Florida, and this is terrible, and we got to do something. This was long planned. And the Maoists made the Black Lives Matter hashtag blow up because they've got all these organizations. And as soon as these three girls came up with it, it was all over Twitter, driven by Liberation Road groups.
Do
So,
you think the average membership of Black Lives Matter even realizes the affiliations of the leadership?
well, at a certain level, I do. The local leaders all would, but the average young kid who just gets out in Ferguson and wants to go and burn down a local house, no, they wouldn't. They're just in for the fun. They believe the propaganda. They're an oppressed nation, and now they're striking back. But 95% of union members don't understand their unions are controlled by communists.
Mhm.
95% of Democrats don't understand the Democratic Party is now controlled by communists.
Mhm.
Um, this is common. The million women who marched with their funny hats,
Yeah,
after Trump's inauguration,
the
they
day
didn't. I'm
after.
sure 98% of those did not realize that was a communist-controlled operation. They
Mhm.
had actual communists up on the podium addressing them. That was all organized by communists, but you would say 98% of them would have had no idea.
Mhm.
We're on the verge of communist revolution in America, and nobody's mentioning the word communist or socialist.
Isn't
It's
that
all
brilliant?
it's unbelievable. It's like Hitler's just about to take over Germany, but nobody's talking about Nazis.
It's truly astonishing, isn't it? I have to give them credit because very little information ever is presented locally in local news about what's happening just 60 miles or 90 miles up the freeway in St. Paul and Minneapolis. There's like this much information flow. Local residents have no idea how devastating the fires have been, or the
No.
fact that a low-income housing project, brand new, nearly finished, was burnt to the ground. All of the businesses, the small ma and pa stores, are lost along University Avenue, right from the capital area down past Snelling, and on toward the river. And then, of course, Lake Street. Small ma and pop businesses are driven out, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
and this is yeah. But see, you're right about the information flow, because you know, I saw a citizen journalist going around downtown Manhattan the other day, blocks and blocks and blocks just boarded up. But most people don't even know this. Most people in rural Minnesota probably do not understand the devastation, and the same in various other cities. So we're being sort of told this is a big peaceful mass movement, while cities are being burnt, people are dying, and people are going, oh, this is just some nice people standing up for their rights because that poor man got killed. And this is an unfolding communist revolution designed to sink the US economy and destroy President Trump to the advantage of the Chinese. That's all this is.
As Black Lives Matter continues to destroy the transportation infrastructure and the communication infrastructure, or all the groups, I don't mean to just blame BLM, but as they continue to go after, say, food distribution, they're going to create these food deserts in the urban areas. People will be suffering. There's Black residents of Minneapolis suffering incredibly because their local food store is burned. It's been looted.
And who are they told to blame? They're told to blame white America for their problems. And this just further radicalizes them. The worse things get, the better it is for the revolutionaries. Yeah. They want to bring America to its knees. They would love mass unemployment, mass poverty, because that creates radicalization and fear and confusion. This is a big destabilization exercise. Mm-hmm. And we got a Maoist revolution on American soil, and nobody says it. The best we get is a bit of criticism of Antifa, right? Which is like this much.
And there too, when they find a case where a white person has broken a window, or a white person has thrown a brick or started a riot somehow, that is vilified as the source of the problem. So racism,
outside white agitators are causing all the problems. This would be peaceful except for those white agitators, you know.
Right. So the narrative continues to spin. Well, what about the church's involvement? I mean, we're seeing local churches being utilized, I mean, prior to the lockdown, for all kinds of leftist groups in Minnesota that call for open borders, call for driver's licenses for all, liberated voter rights issues where anyone should have access to a ballot. A lot of these groups were hosting. Keith Ellison himself was hosted at the local Unitarian Universalist Church, which is the church which Mayor Kim Norton of Rochester attends. So the mayor's own church, Pastor Luke, hosted Keith Ellison along with the local Southeastern Minnesota CARE outreach coordinator, Regina Mustafa. So all of these personalities go to a church and then, of course, speak about white supremacy.
Yeah.
As if that's the issue, but
it's not. The issue is the revolution, and the Unitarian Church is the Communist Party of prayer. That's all that is. It's not even Christian, but it's the Communist Party of prayer. But many, I would say the majority of mainstream Christian churches are also spouting this communist stuff. See, and that's why we're doing the movie Enemies Within the Church, because the Marxists had to infiltrate the church to change the culture enough to accept this kind of revolutionary activity. And they have sucked in of pastors and millions of their parishioners into accepting basic Marxist talking points. Like, you see how this goes, you get Nikki Haley, who wants to be president, a Republican president one day, getting up and talking about 400 years of white oppression. So you've got a Republican a supposedly conservative, feeding into the Maoist narrative. She's talking Mao speak. This is what it is, Maoist propaganda, and she wants to be the Republican leader of the country. So this is how far the people's consciousness has been changed by a long-term program of indoctrination, brainwashing, psychological warfare, the whole lot. This is where America is right now. We're hanging on by a thread.
There's a lot of gaslighting going on as well, and you wonder if there aren't some brick house operations too. But this whole thing is one false flag after another, and people just keep following the squirrel. And there's there's a squirrel over there, so that the endorphin levels of the mob are never satisfied. They're just waiting for the next disaster. They're almost hoping there's going to be another problem on television that night.
Well, it is. You know, the Americans. This is a destabilization, and people are destabilized right now, more so than they've been destabilized probably since the Civil War. Job losses, business failures, failure of confidence in the government, and mass insurrection. This is classic destabilization to push revolution. I'm not saying they're going to get a communist revolution now, but they're going to push this country so far to the left that they may well defeat President Trump. And if they do, the next Democrat will usher in a communist America.
And it looks more like there may be voter fraud. I mean, they're dialing it up to have a lot of voter fraud. Our county just sent out 90,000 absentee ballot applications to voters in Rochester, and in the county widely. But you're supposed to have the initiative to apply for a voter for an absentee ballot. But the whole wish by Secretary Simon is to have everyone voting by mail-in ballots. That'll make it a lot easier to tabulate the results.
As Stalin said, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes that counts. You know, if they get control of the voting process like that, they can well engineer a false blue wave. You know, really, if all things were fair, Minnesota should be going red this year. Minnesota is on the verge of going red. But with all of this, they will aim to co-opt that and stop that. So what you've got really is you've got the blue states are in rebellion against the federal government. And a lot of the blue states are now controlled by communists, like basically Minnesota is. But still, 90% of Minnesotans have no clue, and they won't have any clue until about 5 years after the revolution. You know, when it's all locked down, when they're wondering why they're starving, why they're wondering why their starvation and disease is being blamed on that President Trump from 5 years ago, like they do in every communist country. They always blame, for 35 years, they blame the previous administration for every problem.
And they wanted to have a managed decline over the American empire, right? I mean, some people wanted to have this managed decline where you get us to accept our second-rate power or third-rate power status. But Trump was really reigniting the fire of the spirit of America, and they had to take action, I think, because they realized that, well, we needed to be punished. If we weren't going to go gently, we have to be shoved off stage.
Yeah, well, that's right. You know, this would have happened had it hadn't been for Trump. By the end of Hillary Clinton's first term, we would have been beyond hope, because she would have legalized 20, 30 million illegal immigrants, given them all Democrat voting cards, and they would have had the country. And they would just implement their socialist programs. And by the end of her second term, we'd be fully communist, and probably openly so by that point. You know, with hammer and sickle flags, I mean. But Trump came along and screwed up that narrative, and he was in danger of rallying enough American people to screw it up for a very long time and maybe even reverse it. So they got desperate because they couldn't have this happen. Something that was going to be gentle and we would have been gently euthanized, right? But now we're going to have to be put down.
Well,
now
like
we're going to have to be taken out and shot.
Yeah, right. Now we have to be put down because we weren't going to accept the Merkel, the way she did Europe in the strange suicide of Europe. We had our Minnesota Merkels as well in politics. And Hillary Clinton would have been the mother of all the Merkels in the United States. Just, welcome the caravans and,
she would have opened the borders.
Yeah.
Opened to Syrian and Iraqi refugees and Iranian refugees. Anywhere from a Muslim country would have been welcome. She would have made it. Well, she promised within 100 days of taking office to legalize every single illegal immigrant in the country and give them voting rights. That's at least 22 million people, maybe 40 million. Considering that most presidential elections are won or lost by less than 5 million votes, it's not hard to see what would have happened. That was the recipe for a one-party state, and they almost achieved it. They came that close.
Isn't it interesting? It's no wonder that the local Democrat Party headquarters is also located in a building where you can have a one-stop shop for help with getting a driver's license, help with registering to vote, finding an apartment with your housing voucher, and getting some legal advice, and you can find a job. It's all located in one building, and the Democrat Party's right on the first floor.
Yeah, the Democrat Party is fulfilling the same role the Communist Party used to do in the Soviet Union. All good things come from the party. That's what you got to look for. Look to the party for everything, and the only thing different is the name: DFL versus CPSU, Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And the tyranny has been relatively soft up until now, but when they get complete power, that tyranny will be very hard as it has been anywhere, and they will come after their enemies with no mercy.
It shows signs of heating up a little bit. I mean, they're a little bit more aggressive, and I think they've been encouraged by the numerous protest rallies, and the violence they see being openly committed on the streets leads them to shout things out and yell things in public. We're seeing some interesting kind of low-level assaults taking place, and there's been a number of anomalies in the news about incidents with guns, random shootings, public shootings on the streets. We're not really our journalists are dropping the ball as usual here in Minnesota, Trevor, because we never get the who, what, where, when, why. When you have an Islamist going to a campground and waving a weapon around at the campground and terrorizing families, and then that leads to a shutdown of a highway, and then there's a pile up on the highway. Some very strange things happening.
Yeah, and it won't get reported because it doesn't fit the narrative. Look, a top editor in the New York Times was just fired because he dared to allow a Republican Senator, Tom Cotton, to print an op-ed in the New York Times. So for the sin of allowing a Republican to have an op-ed, this guy got fired. Look, there is a mass psychosis out there right now. This is the Cultural Revolution that went so far that people were eating each other. This is how... What a frenzy. I'm not being figurative, Leah.
No.
There were actual examples of cannibalism in the Chinese Cultural Revolution. People would eat their teachers who dared not to be sufficiently Maoist. There were numerous examples of this happening. So I'm not saying that's going to break out in Minnesota anytime soon, but there is a mass psychosis. You tweet against Black Lives Matter, your husband gets fired from his job. You dare to print a story that is not in your local newspaper that's not sympathetic to Black Lives Matter, your job will go. People understand this, so they're self-censoring now. So they either fit the narrative or they shut their mouths.
They come after people quite obviously, and what can one do, right? Um,
One
there was
can fight and fight and fight and fight. This is the time to fight. There has never been more of a time to fight. When they expect us to cower and slink away with our towels between our legs, this is the time to stand up and fight back real hard.
I like that. I like that a lot. And it seems that as usual, your message is inspirational, and I think a lot of people are going to take heart from this. Um, do you think that if we get a chance to speak again, we could talk further about some more of the local groups in Minnesota that are
Yeah,
related to
absolutely.
those groups?
Yeah,
Unless
sure.
you want to drop some of those names right now, it would be a nice way to help
Well,
educate people
yeah.
quickly. But
Well, we've discussed some, the big one leading this is Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Now go to their website, Fight Back, and it's got all the reports of what they're doing around the country. Fight Back News, Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Go to the Democratic Socialists for America Facebook page, the Twin Cities Democratic Socialists for America. They got all sorts of stuff there about what they're doing in this. But so this is a seamless line from the leadership of the DFL right through Freedom Road, Democratic Socialists of America, Ilhan Omar, Keith Allison, almost all of your DFL politicians, Tim Waltz, his daughter supports Antifa.
that's right.
He was trained in a Marxist training school. The whole leadership of the DFL is Marxist.
His
But
daughter
that's
was warning the protesters in the Twin Cities when and where the
where
National
the
Guard
clips.
would be dispatched. And
Yeah, this
his
is the
daughter,
daughter of the governor,
yeah,
right? But you voted for him, people,
right.
you know, but because you didn't know what he is. And most
Well,
of the time, he's just nice Mr. Midwestern. But when the revolution's on, he's on their side.
yeah.
Now, this should be a warning to every Minnesotan. Get to the polls this year and get your cousins to the polls and your hunting buddies to the polls and your drinking buddies to the polls and everybody in your church to the polls and turn these people out. This could be the year that people of Minnesota actually rise up and start to take their state back. Because if you don't do it this year, folks, I don't ever see you getting the chance again. And if you're sitting on a $400,000 house in the Minneapolis suburbs, if you don't fight back now, that house is going to be worth $250,000 next year and $180,000 a year after that. Then it's going to be like Detroit, where you can't give it away. So if you don't think this is going to affect you, you need to understand this is going to hit you in every possible way. Your kids' schools, your job, and your housing value, the safety of communities. These lunatics want to get rid of the police in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. What they'll do, see, this is part of their setting up a little Mogadishu. They will replace that with civilian control boards and civilian patrols, who will all be Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Freedom Road. This will be a Marxist militia that will basically come in and beat up the people they don't like and close the businesses they don't like and hand out favors to the people they do like. This is
Value.
communism, people.
Right, and the businesses, and they've already done away with the idea of making a new housing start that's a single family dwelling housing start. So it's going to be the advent of more of that pack 'em and stack 'em,
Yeah, the
high-rise
communal
communist
housing, the co-ops, all that sort of
communal
stuff.
ownership. Yeah.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, driving again the ma and pa businesses that are really industrious, driving them out of business and then giving away the properties to people who win grants or something to.
yeah, it'll be cronyism. It'll be all the horrors of crony capitalism combined with with socialism. It'll be the worst of all worlds. It will create little Mogadishus. It'll create no-go zones. And if you're a middle-class white person in the suburbs of Minneapolis, you should be extremely concerned about this, because this is going to affect your property values, your kids' education. Everything about your life is about to change forever unless you stand up this year real hard. There are still enough good people in Minnesota to turf these scumbags out. There's still enough, but there won't be in a couple of years, because you'll get a flight out of Minnesota like you wouldn't believe, and a flight inwards of every communist and doper and Black Lives Matter and anarchist radical you can find, and they will be living off the tax base of those few Minnesotans who still work and can't get out of the state.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing from these boot-kissing public genuflecting activities, the whole foot-washing stuff going on from white people, even from mayors, you can't bow far enough. You can't get on the ground low enough to...
No, there is no appeasement here.
There's no appeasement.
There's no point where it goes and you say, yes, I'll give in, that's enough. That's only the signal for the next step.
There's only
that will never stop.
It'll never stop. You know, there's one group that was actually utilizing cell phone technology, and I know where they got the voting list from, but I can't make that assertion here. But they obtained phone numbers, and they were actually blaming the spread of COVID in Minnesota, and saying that this is adversely affecting black and brown bodies instead of white bodies. So I kept sort of asking more questions, and then I got the names of the two groups that were turning COVID-19 into a racial issue. Well, I seem to remember the press conference when President Trump's Surgeon General was communicating the very same thing, that in black or brown communities or Asian communities, if people are piled up in closer contact with each other, the reality is that the COVID-19 virus will have a better chance of infecting more people. And Trump was lambasted, and the black Surgeon General was lambasted for his comment showing empathy to the African American community. So
it's right. It doesn't matter what you do, does it?
They're fundraising.
It doesn't matter, but that's it. You know, this is, look, everything is about race. But it's not about race. Ultimately, it's about the revolution. But race is the main driver. See, this is what Maoism is. See, the old communists believed that the workers would overthrow the bosses, right? Class struggle.
Right.
But that doesn't work very well in America, because you can start out at the bottom and become a multi-billionaire, or you can start out rich and end up poor. The class is very mobile in America, but race is with you forever. So they knew they couldn't get the American people fired up through class, so they had to use race. And that is what the Maoists focus on. Where you see a race riot, that's where the Maoists are. They use race where the old communists used to use class. But the goal is the same. So instead of what they put it now, so instead of the workers overthrowing the bosses, now it's the oppressed people of color overthrowing white Christian capitalism, right?
Right.
So if you're a white Christian capitalist, you are the devil. You're the old Rockefeller. You're the old capitalist that needed to be overthrown. And that you might be living in the suburbs and earning $74,000 a year and having 3 kids and just getting by, but you're still part of that oppressive minority.
I see what you're saying. There's actually a local La Raza activist who began speaking about Anglo-Saxon racism that was imported to this country. And I engaged in a dialogue and said, well, you actually should look at Latin America and the reasons why Spanish is spoken from the border with Mexico all the way down to Argentina, because you really don't, you have a stake in sharing some guilt, because there's 3 empires that were destroyed, and hey, white people really had very little to do with Central and South America. Well, at least the Spanish did. But that's the reason they speak Spanish. But
and if you look at it logically from that point of view, this whole thing folds. It's a house of cards. But see, the issue is never the issue. This is not about race. If you get into these racial debates, I'm not racist. I've got lots of black friends, whatever. you've lost. You've lost. Because
Right.
that's not the issue here.
No.
They'll just find another way around. The issue is revolution. The issue is, are you for revolution and communism and destroying America, or do you stand with America and the Constitution that gives everybody a chance for liberty and prosperity? Which side are you on? That's how we got it. To save America, we've got to further polarize America. We've got to fly the flag for what we believe in, not take the knee and talk about 400 years of oppression and how guilty we are. We've got to stand for America, stand for the Constitution, stand for the rule of law, and say, you guys are communists and revolutionaries who want to destroy this country for everybody except the very few of you who will run things. You are traitors to this country. That's how we have to frame this debate. And when 90% of the people in the middle who don't know what the heck's going on see us flying the flag of freedom and liberty in the Constitution, and they clearly identify those people as communist revolutionaries, they will come our way, not their way. But right now, the left is getting all the debate, and the right is going, "Oh, look, I'm for you guys. You know, I'm really anti-racist too, and I'm talking about 400 years of oppression. And who's going to get behind wimps like that? Who's going to get behind people who think they have to bow down and lick people's feet on the street? You know, we got to be standing up here. We got to stand up proud. We are the true champions of the multiracial constitutional society where anybody can get ahead who believes in America and who believes in liberty. That's what we stand for. Isn't that something to be proud of? Mm-hmm. They stand for division and hatred and destruction, and they are the heroes right now. How long can we let that go on for?
It is astonishing. And like the Chinese proverb says, may you live in interesting times.
Wouldn't a bit of boring be good right now?
Yeah. Who would have thought we could say the good old days would be the 90s or something?
Yeah, the good old, oh, wow, I wish the Barton was back. I wish, at least the socialism would slow down a little bit.
I missed his town hall meetings. I felt so sleepy.
Yeah, just talking about the sewage, talking about the dogs on the street, instead of the rioters. But look, I'll have to sign off.
That's right.
I've got an appointment, but I'm happy to do this again and go into more depth. And this is a bit of a moving feast. I'm sure we'll see more stuff coming up shortly.
That's right.
But look, just want to give a shout out to all my friends in Minnesota. We know you're behind enemy lines right now, but we are rooting for you. And I still think there's a lot of hope for your state. And I think if people get organized and stand up, on the electoral front, you can do very well in Minnesota this year. And if you can take back a couple of seats in Minnesota, that's going to go a long way towards winning the White House, President Trump, and winning the House back for the GOP. And that gives us hope. Not saying the GOP is great, but I'm saying we got a president who has the House and the Senate. He will be unleashed. And do you think he wants to stick it to these people, folks? I think he does. But we got to give him the opportunity and the power to do it.
And thank you, Trevor, very much. Once again, it's trevorloudon.com. Please check out his website, check out his films and his books available on amazon.com or at trevorloudon.com. Enemies Within the Church is the new work coming out, and The Enemies Within is a previous book that he's written. And thank you very much, a film that he produced. Thank you very much, Mr. Loudon, and we'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, sir. Bye-bye.
Okay.